I Saw My Best Friend in the Woods at Night by Moth Uncle. I've been lucky enough to have lived a relatively full life. I've traveled far and wide, from the rainy cobbled streets of London to the jagged peaks of northern Thailand. Along the way, I made many friends and enjoyed careless flings with temporary lovers before they all slipped back into the black pool of memory. So many cherishable moments in time trapped back in faraway lands. I settled back in the States, doing everything by the book. I found a loving girl who stuck around, and we built a life together that's beautiful. It's a life sacred enough to chisel into a rock wall so it may be immortalized. All of these positive events which I have painstakingly orchestrated through a lifetime of intentional adventure still cannot bury the catalyst which began this chain reaction. I have been running from this my entire life. In a way, the most definable moment of my existence took place over a brief time in a lonely valley in rural West Virginia. This happened back in the early 90s. I lived in one of the most unique places the world had to offer, the National Radio Quiet Zone. It's a 13,000 square mile boundary where all radio activity is heavily limited, and any usage is strictly monitored and reported. Why? It's because in the center of the zone lies a massive observatory with these gigantic radio telescopes taller than the Statue of Liberty. Those towering satellite dishes are listening for any and all radio frequencies coming from deep space, and they need total quiet, an open frequency range. If one little radio or microwave or cell phone occupied any of those frequencies, and that just so happens to be the one an extraterrestrial race was using to shoot signals out into the universe, we might never hear their calls. So, the colossal dishes point to the skies, listening to eternity, listening for anything that was up there. That's the hokey speech observatory officials and local politicians would give to the press, though. I know now from family still in the region that the restrictions are much more relaxed these days, and most of the people in the quiet zone secretly have internet and all the other modern luxuries anyone else has now. But, back when I was living there in the 90s, I can attest to the restrictions being strictly enforced by some bootlicker who worked for the observatory. We were faithfully living an off-the-grid lifestyle then. It was a simple life. Of course, there was no internet and no television. All we had at home was a single landline, which, even for the time, was considered prehistoric. My parents were always dirt poor, as is the trend in West Virginia. My father pretty much lived in a coal mine, which was a few hours deep into the mountains, so I rarely saw him. My mom died when I was 17, and that drove my father even deeper into those mines. The house was left all to me most of the year. The catalyst of my great escape happened when I was 19 and dumb as a box of rocks, shallow as a puddle. I worked for my neighbor who was separated by 5 miles of tangled forest. He had a small farm that took a ton of work to keep afloat. He was also a neo-Nazi. A lot of people in that area sympathized with those views or just looked the other way. I looked the other way. I had one and only friend, Jerry. He worked at the mart. There was no name to the place. It was just a general store that essentially sold bare necessities for life with no bells and whistles. Jerry and I had been friends our whole lives. We went to school together, and our friendship grew even stronger when we both played on the football team in high school. Everyone's pretty close through school, and the graduating class is 44, but Jerry and I just got along with no trouble. We had other friends, but after we all graduated, most got the hell out of town and into a college, or they stuck around and buried their heads into the next chapter, be it a job or a drug. Me and Jerry would go hunting or go fishing, or we'd just sit and do nothing. We'd just sit there and talk all day. It was never anything too deep or cerebral, but looking back, the act of just talking with no greater objective might have been one of the finest experiences. It rivals and maybe even trumps all those glamorous adventures later on in my life. We just sat and listened to each other ramble. To us, we were the funniest guys who ever existed, the most skilled hunters and fishers, and the best at living. It was simple and innocent, and I didn't know how good I had it. When those chilly fall evenings came around, I'd usually finish up at the farm right as the sun fell below the mountains, which then turned a cold and hazy blue. Night would soon follow. Nighttime in the quiet zone, which is already deeply embedded in rural Appalachia, was an abyssal sort of dark. The stars were brilliant, and you could even see those intergalactic clouds of the Milky Way. The sound of night would either be a deafening roar of insects, or the purest, most crystalline silence you could imagine. Silence so perfect, you'd think you could hear the hum of space, your ears listening like those giant satellite dishes not far off. It was one of those chilly fall evenings when my life changed forever. I had just finished up another tiresome day at my neighbor's farm. I drove a clunky old 1972 Chevy Silverado that was allegedly once a deep forest green, although it had rusted into an ugly gradient of poverty. Itching at the dozens of mosquito bites I had earned, I sputtered out of my neighbor's farmland, which involved taking a bumpy, twisting gravel track a quarter-mile down to a road that was somewhat paved. This farm road, which was simply just called 132, took me down to our driveway. I was driving down that pitch-black road, and I was probably going too fast, being a 19-year-old that just got off work and all. I passed by the thick old trees on that snaking switchback, racing for my turn-off to home. My faded headlights only offered me a small oval of light directly in front of my truck. Everything else was lost. In between those twisted old trees, at some point, was a figure that I screeched right by. I didn't know what I had seen until minutes later, and even then it was paranoid guesswork. A man? I thought it had been a man. A naked man. The way my weak headlights had illuminated the figure so entirely led me to believe he had nothing on. Maybe that was just a trick of my eye, though. I thought little of it once I was home, quickly relinquishing control over a crazed, naked man on the side of the road. I just hoped he wouldn't find his way to the house where I'd have to shoot him. The next day, I was off from work. I remember heading down to the mart for a stale candy bar and to see Jerry. We had talked about hanging out a few days prior. When I went into the mart, Jerry wasn't there. That wasn't right. Jerry always showed up to work. He was annoying in that way. Instead, the till was manned by Pete, the dirtiest man in town. "Where's Jerry gone?" I asked Pete. "Dunno. Didn't show today," Pete muttered through labored chewing. "Did he call in?" I asked. "I don't know." He sucked in a violent breath. "Why don't you go try his folks?" This was hopeless. I already knew Jerry's parents had gone out of town for a sick relative in Tennessee. I quit the mart and moved on to his house regardless. Jerry's family lived in an old shadow of a house up the main street a few miles. I knocked on their door multiple times and looked through the windows and found no one inside. Defeated, I went back home. At some point, I tried to call his house on our landline to see if maybe he had gone out for a little while. The damn phone wasn't even working. For the first time in a while, I had felt truly alone. It was high noon, and there were so many more hours until nighttime, and then a whole eternity of night until the next lonely day. I think waves of grief began to finally break through the levees I had put up for 2 years. I missed my mom, and hell, even missed my dad. I wanted to cry, but I wouldn't give myself the pleasure of a release. Instead, I bottled it up. Where the hell is Jerry? That thought would keep running through my mind. In a town as small and remote as this one was, it was rare to not know the whereabouts of your inner circle. It was driving me stir-crazy by the time night rolled around. That was a defining night as well. I had trouble sleeping from the upsetting nature of the day. I was tossing and turning while flashes of silent, distant lightning filled my room. Eventually, I got up to go be miserable in another room. I opened my bedroom door, which was at the end of a hallway, and then that hallway led into our living room, which had a big bay window revealing the dark forest beyond. Somebody was pressed up against the window and peering in. I froze in place while my skin ignited. Whoever it was out there was just standing, hands placed on the window with their forehead stuck to the glass. I couldn't tell if they could see me submerged in the dark of the hall. How long had he been standing there? Who the hell was he? What's he doing? I thought he had to have been a burglar. I'll fucking kill you! I shouted out from the dark, expecting him to dart into the forest. He, or whoever, just kept looking in. I felt he was looking right at me. His head never scanned around, and not even a flinch could be perceived from my outburst. He was definitely looking right at something. I said, get the fuck out of here now! I tried again. Nothing. Can he not hear me? I thought. I knew he could hear me. I can remember being a kid and hearing my parents fighting or calling my name for dinner through those pitiful walls while I was out in the yard. I was shaking and I couldn't feel my body from fright. Without warning, a flash of distant lightning filled the skies and exposed the person, who I now saw was a man dressed in an all-black sort of military outfit. He was wearing some kind of night vision on his head. The few milliseconds of light showed me those two things, and I wish I hadn't even been offered such information. I could have vomited right then and there. He was looking directly at me the whole time with that night vision, and he definitely wasn't some strung-out burglar. This man looked like a soldier. As soon as I put all the pieces together, I ran to get a gun. Within seconds, I crashed into my room, grabbed my revolver, and pointed it to the bay window. He was gone. I spent the rest of that night clearing the house 1 hour at a time, always unsure if the man was still watching from outside or had silently slipped in. It was absolutely terrifying, but nothing more ever came of it. On my weaker nights, I still see him out of the corner of my eye, just peering in through the windows. The next day, I went down to the police station before work and tried to tell them of my encounter with the night vision man. I don't think they took me all that seriously. So, this man was just gazing into your window? Just sorta looking in, and then he ran off when you threatened him? Asked Lou with a puzzled grin. Me and Jerry had often referred to Lou as Deputy Dumbass, since he was incapable of complex thought. His father was the only reason he became an officer. No, not exactly. I just said he didn't move when I yelled at him. He only ran when I went to go grab a gun. I spit back at Lou, who likely didn't hear my reply. Well, okay then. Sounds peculiar. A man with night vision and military garb and all. He twiddled his thumbs and sniffled his nose. You sure this wasn't just some illusion of some sort? No, Lou. That's officer to you, son. I know damn well what I saw out there. My mind isn't looking for illusions. How could you know? How about you help me for once and just put some damn feelers out? Could you do that? I'll get with Sheriff. Today? Tomorrow? Next week? I don't want to end up dead on account of your leisurely pace. We'll get on it. Pronto. Bye, now. Lou shuffled away in his oversized pants. He couldn't solve a murder if the culprit turned himself in. Infuriated, I itched my mosquito bites until they bled and set off. I stopped by the mart again to check and see if Jerry was around. I rushed in and saw Stinky Pete folding a newspaper into something juvenile. Jerry? I asked. Do I look like him? Pete snapped back. I looked him up and down, the sound of buzzing flies filling the silence. Do you know where I could get some of those night vision goggles around here? I asked just to see what would happen. What the hell do you need that for? Pete responded in a flat way, not even looking up from his arts and crafts project. One suspicion down. I went to work, and it was a blur of automatic motion and hazy, awful daydreams. The night came again, and this time I felt anxious by the all-encompassing purple and black shift of the sky. I got in my truck for the quick drive home, and suddenly remembered the naked man. What was that guy about, I thought? Was he the same guy as the night vision man? I didn't want to think about any of it for too long. It was all so unordinary. I didn't feel safe going home, but there was actually nowhere else for me to go, unless I just slept in the truck. Maybe I should sleep in the truck, I pondered. I should get on a payphone and call Dad. And dread filled me thinking about that. Where the hell is Jerry? I started down the chaotic mud track, unsure if I was going home or finding a deserted parking lot for the night. I made it to 132 and paused. Through a small gap in the canopy was the familiar shine of the observatory's red flashing lights on some low clouds. Many miles away, but still a comfort nevertheless. Something man-made and technologically advanced unlike anything else in the greater area. So advanced and important, it required the rest of us to live in the past just to operate. Maybe I could go there if I needed help. Maybe they'd be nice to me and give me somewhere to stay. They'd probably just look at me sideways. I turned left onto 132 and headed home. My truck's headlights shone a pathetic beacon forward as I drove like every other night. The corridor of black trees on either side closing in, trying to reclaim 132. No matter how many times I drove that road, I could never pinpoint exactly where I was. The trees always seemed to change. Who would ever know if they did, and what would it mean? I passed two particularly twisted trees, and there it was again, the naked man. I slammed on the brakes this time. The truck shook violently to a stop, and I looked in my rear view, trying to make the man out. He wasn't far behind, but I couldn't see him. It was so dark. I craned my neck to look behind me, and beyond the faint glow of my brake lights was a formless void of black. I put the truck in reverse, making sure I saw no headlights approaching from behind as I rolled back up the road. It felt like hours, or like I was trapped in a loop of reversing and scanning the tree line. Then I saw a pale body amid the grainy dark, standing perfectly still. I kept creeping the truck nearer and nearer until I passed the pale form. The person was standing a few yards off the left shoulder. It was seemingly unaware of my presence. Still shrouded in the blackness of night, I tried to get their attention. I couldn't make out any details despite being so close. So I kept backing up and angled my truck so that my headlights exposed the person. The dim lights finally showed me something awful. "Jerry!" I screamed. "Jerry, oh my God!" I got out of the truck and ran up to him. That was not Jerry. Standing before me with perfect posture was my best friend. He was fully naked and totally catatonic. His mouth was agape and his eyes were shut. I could tell he'd been standing there for a very long time because insects had begun to use him to their advantage. A black widow spun its web in between his legs. Ants crawled all across his body, and mosquitoes drank from him freely. I kept calling his name directly to his face, and he didn't do anything. He looked like a statue of himself, or one of those wax sculptures. I was so petrified that I myself entered a sort of stupor of my own, just looking at him with terror. I finally let myself cry. I tried shaking him awake, and I never felt a body so utterly stiff and unmoving. Then, one of those giant, spiny house centipedes crawled out of his hair and all around his face until it sought refuge in his open mouth. Irreparable damage. Seeing your friend in that state. He was the closest thing I ever had to a brother. If he had just died instead, a car wreck, hunting accident, or some genetic tragedy, I could eventually overcome the crashing waves of grief. But this was something else entirely. He wasn't even dead. At least I didn't think so. I tried to calm myself enough to detect any sign of life. I mean, he was standing up perfectly straight. He couldn't have been dead. At one point, I could have sworn I heard the quietest, saddest wheezing whistling through his open mouth like it was his last breath. That centipede was still in there. Who knows how deep it ventured. I don't know how long I sat there just panicking. I can't faithfully convey the utter alien nature of it all. Was he alive or dead or something new? I tried to move him. I tried so hard. He wasn't going anywhere. I was waiting for another car to pass us by so I could wave them down, but no one ever came. Whatever was going on with Jerry, I swore to him I'd stay by his side. I told him I wasn't going to leave him, and I had hoped there was a piece of him still floating around in his caged body that could hear me. I brushed all the bugs off of him. I grabbed a stick and persuaded the Black Widow to abandon its home. I even searched around in Jerry's mouth for the centipede, but it had fallen further into him. I tried to keep him clean, and I tried to keep myself calm. It could have been hours in that vacuum of agony. I'll never know. All I know is that somewhere within that space, I left my friend out there in that abyss, cold and alone. I shot awake in my bed, covered in even more mosquito bites and even a few ticks. Judging by the colonies of insects which occupied Jerry, I wasn't curious where I had gotten them. I was, however, greatly concerned at what had just happened. I had blacked out or repressed something awful. I don't know. The sun shone through my blinds in brilliant gold. My truck was parked outside. I raced down my driveway, my truck buckling and screeching for mercy. It was only a few minutes until I found the twisted trees where Jerry had stood. Those two trees always looked the same. I got out and examined the ground beneath me. I saw 2 footprints sunken deep into the ground, and then in front of them must have been the result of my frenzy last night. I shouted his name through the dense and uncaring forest. I cried again at the absurdity of it all, of the last few days. Where had he gone this time? Had someone taken him? Did he snap out of that trance? The only thing that motivated me was knowing he must be alive, and somewhere else now. I sped my truck into town, prepared to make a scene that would be talked about for generations. I whipped into the police station's parking lot and stormed my way to the door. I could already see the looks from everyone in my peripheral. I swung the door open, ready to burst out into hysterics about what I had seen. Instead, I saw Sheriff Morgan staring at me. It was a large and dominating presence. He got the first word in. "Jerry's been looking for you everywhere," he exclaimed. What? I stammered. "What are you talking about? Jerry was just..." "You just missed him. He seemed real upset and said he needed to get a hold of you." Sheriff Morgan interrupted and placed a lot of emphasis on the word needed. "Well, I was just at home. I just woke up," I said, so confused. "Maybe he's there now. It seemed pretty urgent to me." "Oh, okay. I guess I trailed off into a trance. I guess I'll try and catch him." "Everything all right between you two? What's going on?" He refused to elaborate. Sheriff Morgan said while closing in on me. "It's nothing. We're just... well, we're unordinary, I suppose." I was just letting my mouth decide what to say. My brain was overheating. I stumbled back out of the police station and, after the door shut behind me, proceeded to sprint to my truck. I made it home in record time and searched all around for Jerry. I couldn't find him anywhere. I was about to get back in the truck to maybe try and catch him back at his house, but then I saw a small piece of paper under a rock by the back door. I went to pick it up, and it read, Meet me at the Black Rock as soon as you see this. Make sure you're alone. Jay. My hands shook with adrenaline, fear, and also excitement at the sight of seeing my best friend's handwriting. Proof he was still himself enough to know me and know something was wrong. Maybe he could explain what was happening to him. I got in the truck. The Black Rock was our secret fishing spot that was likely no more a secret than anywhere else, but we always had the best luck there. It was near rapids in the river that roared day and night. We'd always cast our lines and sit on this big, smooth black rock. It was about a half hour out of town and a pain to get to, so I knew going in that whatever Jerry had to say was something he wanted to make sure stayed between us. I saw the old crooked sign that advertised gas at 22 cents per gallon and pulled in behind the abandoned service station. Behind the building was a dense tree line with a tiny opening to an old trail people used to use often. I walked down the trail as if I was hunting game. I could see through tiny holes in the dense brush, the strong current of the river ahead. I recounted all the times I had drunkenly stumbled up and down this beaten path. All the good times. Now it felt final, like a funeral. I came out the other end and followed the river's run until I saw Jerry. He was indeed sitting on the black rock, and from behind and a distance away, he looked totally normal. This could have been any other day, where we'd be fishing, and I just ran back to the car to grab something unimportant. I couldn't contain myself as much as I wanted to, had planned to. "Jerry!" I yelled with a childish crack in my voice. He turned and looked at me, waving me over slowly. "Jerry, what the hell, man? I mean, we've got some serious catching up to do," I said as I fast approached him. I wanted to tackle him and call him a dumbass and ask him days' worth of questions, but I knew I had to unravel what I had seen gently and methodically. I walked right up to him, and part of me had to make sure it was really him. He had barely addressed me beyond the slow wave. "Hey dude, I got your note. I've got a lot of shit to..." I was interrupted by him. "Sit down, man," he said with an awfully subdued tone. He sounded 10 years older. "Sure." I sat next to him, staring at him like he was the answer to an ancient mystery. He itched his arm and let out a horrible sigh. The kind of sigh released before words come out that will ruin your life. "I don't know how to tell you this," he said. "I really don't. Just lay it on me, man. I got plenty to tell you, too." Oh, man. He sighed again, putting his head in his hands and sniffling. I placed a hand on his shoulder, and my vision became watery. He bucked it off. "Okay, here it goes. I've been seeing some weird shit lately, and I don't know how to explain it. Maybe you can help me," Jerry said. "Of course. What have you seen?" "A few nights ago, I shot awake. It was late, like almost crack of dawn type late. Would I even need to tell him what I had seen? Or was he already aware of what was happening to him? I get this strange feeling, Jerry continued. I feel eyes on me from somewhere. So I grab the Beretta and I take a walk around the house. Now it's real quiet out, which was odd because this time of year it's usually, in your face kind of loud with all the bugs. So I'm walking around and then I see something. Up on a mound with no trees or nothing, I see a silhouette of somebody. I immediately wanted to interrupt Jerry and tell him I had seen the same man, the night vision man. But he was clearly upset in a way I'd never seen, so I let him continue. He's just standing there, looking my way. And he just kept standing there. It took a minute, but I eventually started yelling, threatening him. I told him I had a gun and all that. He didn't seem to care, didn't move a muscle. I was about to fire a round off into the air to try and scare him for real, but as soon as I pointed the gun to the sky, he took off. I felt every molecule in me vibrating. It was so hard to wait to tell him my side of things. It was so hard to look him in the face now, knowing there was a centipede digesting in him. I felt like I had watched him die, but somehow worse. And now he was back here talking to me like normal. I took off work the next day, which I know isn't like me, Jerry admitted. The whole situation rubbed me the wrong way, and I was so damn tired. So I came here to try and take my mind off things. Jerry wiped his eyes, but more tears rushed out as soon as he took his hands away. The next night came. I was having a rough sleep and woke up around a similar time. I felt strange again. I get out of bed and I try to avoid looking out at that mound, but, I eventually do. And when I do, I see that man again. Same place, exact same position. I watched him this time, watched for any movement or odd behavior. Nothing. I felt like he could see me, even though I was far off and hidden in the shadows, but I just kept looking at him for a while. It was the night vision man. Everything Jerry was saying to describe this man was lining up to my experience with him. But why? Why both of us? And who the hell was he? Right as I was building up the courage to go try and scare him or shoot him or whatever, he took off again. And I'm still curious if it was the exact same time as the night before. Jerry stared out and took a break between recounting his last few nights, and those pauses were agonizing. I wanted to use those perfect gaps to tell my side already, but I could tell if I interrupted, he might erupt on me. Besides, I didn't want him to lose his train of thought. I just came back here again and tried to amp myself up. I told myself to be a fucking man and to shoot that bastard if he came back on my property again. Just shoot him down and worry about the rest later. It was a threat, Jerry said, nodding. He was a threat. Jerry itched his arms aggressively, and I could see the scabs coming off as he did. Last night, I decided to stay up and wait. I was gonna just camp out and watch that mound. I had my Beretta in hand and, yeah, I felt like a goddamn lunatic, Jerry said before a long pause. All right. Here we go. I'm sorry, man. What do you have to be sorry for? I asked. Jerry just sighed and continued. I nod off at some point, okay? I was sitting there since dusk, so boredom must have gotten the best of me. I wake up and I see the guy on the mound again. I'm scared at first, but then I'm honestly just angry. Like, who the fuck gave him the right to come on our land and be a damn creep? So, I storm out there and I walk up to him. He doesn't move. He doesn't do anything. I keep warning him, last chance, asshole, and whatnot. He's not budging. I get pretty close to him before I realize something fucked up. Jerry sighed. He's naked. Dick's out in the wind. I point my gun at him and I nearly pull the trigger right then and there. I don't, though. Instead, I keep my gun fixed on him and walk a few more steps forward. Naked. The night vision man wasn't naked for me. Suddenly, Jerry removed something from his waistband. Tell me why the fuck it was you, man. Jerry growled, his Beretta now laying in his lap. That hit me like a gunshot from his pistol. My vision warped and my body felt like it had fallen 1,000 feet. I couldn't believe this. He was mistaken. He must have been. I was the one who saw him, not the other way around. I watched his stiff body stand in the mud for hours the night before. I peeled the beetles from his skin and waited for help that never came. I did everything I could for him, and now he's got a gun on me. I couldn't understand. This was all so far beyond me. We were just kids. I swear I did everything I could have done for him in that horrifying moment. Then I remembered my unexplained blackout. My ambiguous return home. All of these complex thoughts and emotions turned into one single tear that rolled down my cheek as I stared directly into my best friend's eyes, who now looked at me with fury and rage. You, Jerry muttered as he tightened his grip around his gun. You fucking freak. You act all innocent now, but I saw you. I walked right up to you and you couldn't even open your eyes to look at me. You had your mouth open and you wouldn't move. What the hell is going on with you, man? Drugs? It better be drugs or you're seriously fucked up in the head. Showing up to my house. Stalking me. Naked? No, I blurted out. No, no, no! Don't lie to me. I'm not here to listen to your bullshit. Jerry barked back. Jerry, I saw you. I've seen you too. What do you mean you've seen me too? What the fuck does that even mean, man? You were standing on the side of 132 last night, and I saw you the other night too. But I didn't know it was you yet. On my way home from the farm, you were standing in the dark, naked. Get the fuck out of here. What are you even talking about? You were standing there in the exact same way as you described me. Naked, eyes shut, mouth wide open. There were bugs all over you. You looked dead. I tried to move you, but you wouldn't budge. You wouldn't move. I tried so hard to get you to fucking move. That's impossible. I would remember something like that. I would remember standing outside your house fucking naked too. I remember you threatening to shoot me, but I don't. Jerry stood up, his gun still drawn. He paced back and forth. What the fuck? He said to himself. He pounded his head with frustration. I know. Listen, man, I know. I know it sounds absolutely insane. I know. There's no way that I was naked on the side of the road multiple nights. There's just simply no fucking way that happened. I would have died, right? Like, something would have gotten me. A bear or something. I would have been arrested at some point. Jerry tried to reason with the unreasonable. I began to piece things together in my mind. A distorted puzzle that didn't fit together in our way of thinking, but maybe to something else. I looked out at the river rushing us by. At some point, when I was out there with you, I blacked out completely. I thought I had just blocked it out or something because you were so messed up, and it was just awful to see you like that. But now I think I blacked out and then became like you, I said in a defeated way. I don't get it. I just don't see it, man. Jerry refused. You said you nodded off at some point when you were staking out the mound. Maybe that was you entering that state, I suggested. You said you sat down around dusk. Well, I get off about an hour after, and I'm driving home in the dark. That could be just enough time for you to arrive in your place. This is so fucking stupid. You sound like a space cadet, Jerry said, growing equally defeated. The fight in him was leaving slowly, too. I stayed the course with my crackpot theory. It was confusing enough to slowly calm Jerry down, but I had felt so betrayed by something out there. What was happening to us? I couldn't believe I was also being assumed every night and terrorizing people I cared about. And just the why of it all was so frustrating. A mystery I knew I'd never get to the bottom of. A mystery as enduring as the meaning of life or what came before the universe. There's no understanding this, Jerry. I think we just accept it. Tonight, we'll be out there again. Maybe we can watch over each other until it stops, I said. I still don't see how I wouldn't remember standing out there naked. Look at your arms and your legs. Shit, look everywhere. You're covered in bites. You don't get those at the mart. You don't even get those out here. Jerry looked at his arms and poked his head under his shirt, flicking it back into place and huffing with frustration. I just don't. Jerry, just let it lie. Let it sink in, man. We both sat there for a while, listening to the wise river crash. I heard the crunch of gravel beneath a boot and looked up to see Jerry flinging his gun into the river. It cracked the water's surface, and that was it. I had some nasty thoughts just now. Figured out how to get rid of that, Jerry mumbled. I had thought some nasty thoughts too in that period of horrible reflection. I thought maybe we could end the confusion real quick and easy at the Black Rock with that pistol. I thought maybe I could take out Jerry in his next trance with that pistol, and then I'd do myself. I didn't want to know his nasty thoughts. We continued to sit in silence. Something was forever disconnected between us. Something was forever keeping us bonded together. Within 4 days, I'd become a different person forever. Something in me shifted. I don't think it was a normal shift of a young adult, like becoming jaded or losing innocence. I think it was something absolutely transformative, something that changed my DNA. I felt biologically altered from that time on. Somebody or something out there had played God, or maybe God played with us. We entered our respective trances for 3 more nights before they stopped entirely, at least for us. We watched over each other in the dark, making sure no wildlife took us, and we even followed each other back home. We were hard to keep up with. We'd both take the same route to our locations each night, but it was as the crow flew. I don't know what would happen within us or why it happened. I don't know why we went to where we did and why we were both relatively close to one another's home when we entered that state. We just did our best to support one another in this inexplicable spell. We were cautiously thrilled when everything stopped after just a week. One awful week that controls my life to this day. The invisible hand had left its mark, though, and with that mark began a life of running. Jerry did the same. We got out of that town as quickly as 2 broke 19-year-olds could. We went our separate ways, and have never spoken since. I'll never forget all the fun we had before that week. Life was just easy. Jerry, I'll always cherish our friendship, even if we were forced apart by the unknowable. Wherever you are, I hope you're happy and far away from that place that took so much from us. It all started with corn. Buy mayonnaise on a hot dog, and you're listening to Creepypasta. My name is Ryan. I was a 30-something-year-old failure of a man who was hardly holding himself together a couple of years before I'm writing this. I lived in a mess. A shitty little apartment with a bedroom, what you could call a living room, and a bathroom the size of an airplane one I inhabited. Didn't have a clear floor in years. I barely worked enough to live. I would regularly spend my free time drunk, and I hadn't eaten a vegetable in about 3 years, which made the next part especially weird. One morning I woke up and took my weekly shit, and saw something strange in my toilet. Corn. I thought it was strange because, as previously listed, I hadn't eaten a vegetable in years, let alone corn. I chalked it up to something I did while drunk. Maybe I just craved corn for some reason and decided to get some instead of going after my typical junk food. I moved on from that event, but I kept having corn in my stool. The next week there was corn in my stool, then a few days later corn again. It eventually got to a point where every couple of days I was having corn in my stool, and I was completely lost as to where it was coming from. After 2 months of constant corn, I eventually noticed something even stranger. I could see the floor of my room for the first time since I had moved in years ago. I must have started cleaning my room when I was drunk. There was still trash everywhere, but far less than there used to be. I guess I didn't question any of it because it wasn't a bad thing. I actually liked not having to trudge my way through heaps of fast food wrappers and boxes of old junk food, and I wasn't going to complain if drunk me wanted to renovate a little bit. But after that, it got weirder. I would wake up after I went to sleep and my head wouldn't be burning from a hangover. I would notice myself having more bowel movements than I used to. My clothes were cleaned and folded, despite the fact that would have taken hours for drunk me to do. My room was mopped for God's sakes, and yet I still didn't question it at that point, despite the fact I didn't own a mop, let alone have any intentions of borrowing one. Despite all of that, I still didn't question it until I came home one day and saw that my bed was made. I couldn't have done it because I never made my bed. Drunk me couldn't have done it because he wasn't there, which only meant that somebody else was doing it. My first thought wasn't that somebody was breaking in, but rather that maybe my landlord was doing it, or maybe a concerned neighbor. But then I remembered somebody. I had an old friend from high school message me online about a month before all of this happened. He wanted to say hi to me and catch up. I wasn't exactly willing to, but he was probably the best man I ever knew, and I would feel bad leaving him on red. He was one of the few people who ever spoke to me and tried to befriend me. I kept to myself mostly, but he still tried to talk to me despite my lack of interesting conversation. I told him that if he wanted to hang out, he could come over in front of my apartment and we could talk for a bit. But he actually took it a step further and came inside and talked to my landlord who happened to be there at the time. Of course, he told him where my apartment was, because he had no sense of people's safety, and the thought that this person might be coming in to murder me or something, so needless to say, my old high school friend knocked on my front door and saw my horrid apartment. "Oh," he said to me, taken aback from the sight and smell of my living conditions. How have you been, man?" He managed to stammer through after coming to terms with his shock. I am fine," I replied in embarrassment and shame. "Do you want to go outside?" We ended up not going back into my apartment. Instead, we went to the front of the complex and talked for a while. He asked me what I've been up to, which I replied with a simple, "Not much." He seemed to accept that answer without prying much further. I asked him how he had been, and his life had been great. Talking about how he had just gotten married, his job, his house, his lifestyle that was far better than mine. I don't want to say I was seething with jealousy, but I was definitely made more aware about how terrible my life was compared to his, and probably everyone else's. I always knew that my life was awful and that I needed a change, but I just never found the motivation to start. Once the garbage piled, I just let it continue to pile because it had been too difficult to clean up. He eventually told me straight up, "Dude, you live in a mess." I was taken aback by the blatant statement, but he continued, "You can't keep living like that. It's going to kill you." I don't remember what I said, but I think I made a remark about how it's easier said than done and some other stuff. But despite the fact I was probably an asshole about it, he simply offered me some help. "Look, man, If you ever need it, I can help you clean up your apartment and maybe the rest of your life. Just call me, I'll be happy to help. I was shocked at this point. I have to go now, but if you need help, please don't hesitate to ask. I never did call him back, but since that has been happening, I figured maybe I should. Before I called him, I had to even practice what to say. I realized how ridiculous it sounded to ask a friend if he was breaking into my apartment every day to slowly clean up my shithole of an apartment while I was either drunk, sleeping, or at work. But I figured my landlord would be the type of guy to give him a spare key or something to help him get in. And he also knew I didn't have anything worth robbing. I finally called him and just asked him if he'd like to come by my apartment someday, to which he said he'd come by, but that it would be in a couple of months. I decided to set up some cameras in my house to see if I could catch anyone breaking in when I went to bed. I realized how ridiculous the idea that it could be my friend doing it was, and decided to see if maybe there was a squatter in my apartment or something who was taking care of me for some reason. When I checked the cameras the next day, I was terrified. This long, spindly creature came out of a shadow in the corner and moved around the ceilings like a spider and walked across the floor sideways like a crab. It looked emaciated, with what looked like a 5-foot-tall torso with ribs poking out at the very top. They looked like they could rip through at any second. It had a narrow head that was a dome with dents where the eyes should be, but simply with smooth skin over them. It reminded me of that squid at the bottom of the ocean with 20-foot-long arms, the way they both weren't meant to be seen by the human eye, but were both discovered in darkness. The disproportionately long arms, of which I'm sure there were at least 8, but more seemed to appear and disappear at random, started scooping up trash, taking it outside, and then coming back in. It did that for a couple of hours before coming back inside with a container of something and a large glass of what I assume was water, making its way to where I was drunkenly sleeping. It slowly reached an arm out to me, which bent at strange angles. I barely understood how it could possibly do without snapping, and pulled the covers over my body, leaving only my head exposed. It proceeded to pour the water down my throat, and fed me several different types of food from the container, including strawberries, spinach, cucumber, and, of course, corn, before it went back to a corner in my room, where it disappeared. Now, I know what you're thinking now. I should have packed my bags then and there and never looked back. I know, logically, that was the correct choice, but I want you to look at it from my point of view. I was living a life that was the pinnacle of misery. I went to bed in a small apartment with nobody who cared for me, surrounded by filth, to a completely clean apartment and a decent diet. At this point, I had started taking care of myself too. I was bathing more regularly, not drinking as much, and even started cleaning up messes myself too. This was a good thing. This was truly improving my life, even if I didn't completely understand it. The creature even managed to get me a job interview for a place that paid way more. I have no idea how it sent the email, but it was further proof to me that it wanted to improve my life. My life was on the up and up. I got the job the creature landed me an interview for. I was more social, I was happier and healthier. I even started talking to a girl. If you were truly where I was and during this time period, you would have been happy about all of this too, despite the obvious strangeness of it all. It had become such a state of normalcy for me that at some point I sort of forgot about its existence. I stopped checking the cameras after a while because I knew what I would have seen, and honestly, I didn't care how my life was being improved. I was just happy to not be miserable for a change. At this point, I had completely forgotten about my friend coming over. When I heard a knock at my door, I was taken completely off guard by the sight of my old friend, who had a cleaning caddy with multiple sponges, 4 different types of cleaning spray for different surfaces, 2 cleaning brushes, 2 cans of Febreze, and a few other items. He was in shock at the sight of my apartment, which was completely spotless at this point, and almost dropped the caddy full of supplies before catching himself. We ended up talking for hours. Among the many things we talked about, I told him about my new job, the girl I'd been seeing, and my complete turnaround. In turn, he told me about his wife and what he did for work. He told me he moved around a lot for work and happened to be staying in the city where I lived last time I saw him, and happened to see me online and figured he'd pop in to see how I was doing at the time. He explained to me that when he saw my living conditions, he knew he couldn't just leave an old friend like that. When we finally finished talking, we hadn't realized how late it was. He told me he practically lived across the state and that it would be at least a 5-hour drive. I invited him to stay the night instead, to which he obliged and said he simply needed to call his wife to tell her he'd be back the next day, and would leave first thing in the morning. When he returned, I offered him my bed, to which he refused. I insisted that he should take the bed, and I would sleep on the old futon that I'm pretty sure came with the place. After I insisted I'd be a terrible guest if I didn't allow him to sleep in a comfortable bed, he finally relented. When I woke up the next morning to my friend gone, I didn't question it. When he didn't answer my text saying I enjoyed having him over, I figured he was a busy man and probably didn't have time to respond. When the police came to my door, I was more concerned. "Ryan Miller?" the officer asked with a mixture of concern and accusation in his voice. Yes, I responded nervously. "That's me." The man gave the inside of my apartment a look. "May I come in?" he asked. "You're not in trouble. We just need to speak with you." After I let the officer in, he explained everything. My friend had gone missing after he spent the night at my house. They said they knew I had nothing to do with his disappearance since they found his car hours away from my location, but still wanted to know if I knew anything about it since I was the last person to see him. I asked the officer what happened, to which he responded, "We found his car parked on the side of the road about 3 hours away from here, but he wasn't inside of it. After his wife reported him missing, we figured maybe you knew anything about why he disappeared, since you were the last person to see him." He continued, "Did he complain about anything? Did he bring up being unhappy about work or something like that?" I thought about it for a hard minute. During the hours we spent talking, he never seemed upset with his life. He had annoyances here and there, sure, but it's not like he suspected his wife was cheating on him or he thought his job was dead end. He had the same thoughts most people had about life. It was annoying, but at the end of the day, we're glad we're here. "No, nothing," I finally said. He didn't have any complaints that would have warranted him just disappearing. After a while, The officer left and I remained worried and confused. It took me 3 whole hours of worrying about what happened to my friend before I realized the cameras were still recording. I brought the footage back up from the night prior and watched the entire thing until I saw the creature pop out from the shadows, except it ignored me and headed straight for the bedroom. It moved too quickly for a creature of such proportions and fragility. When it made it to the bedroom, it simply stared, except it looked almost hungry. There was a strange saliva that seemed to come out of what I can only assume is its mouth, and it simply stared there for hours, until my friend, as promised, left first thing in the morning. I watched the creature lunge into the shadows right before my friend's alarm went off, and watched as my friend snuck by me out of the door to try not to wake me up. I watched in horror as the creature left outside of the window, which was on the same side of the building as my friend's car was parked. I don't know if the creature killed my friend or ate him or what, but the moment I saw that, I realized it was not safe to live there anymore. I realize now, I should have known that the moment I saw a demon in my living room picking up trash, but I figured I made the choice right in time. I didn't just leave the apartment complex. I moved states. I live on the opposite side of the country. I didn't even fully pack all my stuff before I left. I took what I picked fit into one briefcase. That was either somewhat valuable or would be annoying to replace, and left as fast as I could. I never gave the police that information because I knew it would be insane and nobody would believe me. So I simply got as far away from that thing as possible. Now, it's years later. I found a good job where I'm at right now. I live in an even nicer apartment too. The girl I was talking to didn't seem to understand what I was doing, which was also extremely difficult to explain, so we naturally stopped seeing each other. Other than that, my life is great. I kept some of the good habits too. I clean up after my messes, I stop drinking, I make sure no garbage ends up on my floors. I eat better, I even started going for daily walks to help me be healthier. All was going great. Except for one day, where I'd slept in and was going to be late for work. I rushed out the door as fast as I could, cutting as many corners in my daily routine as possible, which of course meant I couldn't have made my bed. But when I came home that day, exhausted after a long day of work, I saw something that made my heart drop to my stomach. My bed was made. Have you ever played 3 Leaves, 2 Branches, 1 Beak by Toast with Wi-Fi? And you're listening to Creepypasta. That was the first thing Jeremy ever said to me. I'd been babysitting the boys for 3 days while their parents were away, and until that moment he had not spoken a single word. Not to me, not to his brothers, not even to answer simple questions. The other 2 told me he was just shy. They said he had always been like that. Sweet, polite, just quiet around new people. Still, 3 full days of silence felt like something more than shyness. There were 3 of them, each about 3 years apart. Josh was the oldest, then Jonathan, and Jeremy was the youngest. He was 8, almost 9. The first couple of days were easy, almost too easy. There were no arguments, no complaints, no messes I could not handle. They played together, did their homework without being told twice, and ate everything I put in front of them. At night, they went to bed without a fight. It felt wrong, in a way I could not explain. Babysitting in the past was never that smooth. This evening, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I realized Jeremy was standing in the doorway. I had not heard him walk in, he was just there, watching me. When I turned toward him, he did not look away. He did not blink. His hands hung at his sides, and for a moment I had the strange feeling that he had been standing there for a while, waiting for me to notice him. I started to tell him something, but he spoke before I could. Have you ever played 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak? His voice was quiet and careful, like he was choosing each word before letting it out. I let out a small, nervous laugh. I had not expected his first words to be something like that. No, I said. I've never heard of it. Is it fun? His face changed instantly. He smiled wide and sudden, like he had been waiting for me to say exactly that. Yes, he said. I love this game. He looked too happy for me not to ask. How do you play? I asked. We have to go outside first, he said. Then I will tell you the rules. I glanced at the clock. It was already late, and his brothers were upstairs getting ready for bed. It is too late to go outside, I told him. You need to go to bed. For a moment he did not react. He just stood there, staring at me with that same small smile. Please. He did not raise his voice. He did not whine or complain. He just repeated it, softer each time. Please. 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 Each word sounded thinner than the last, like it was being pulled out of him. I hesitated. I should have said no, but something about him standing there like that, after days of silence, made it hard to refuse. Is it quick? I asked. Yes, he said immediately. I let out a breath. Fine, but after that you go straight to bed. He nodded once, sharp and certain, then turned and ran. I followed him down the hall, calling after him to slow down, to at least put on shoes, but he did not listen. By the time I reached the back door, he was already outside. Barefoot, standing in the middle of the yard, not moving. The porch light flickered as I stepped out after him, and a strange stillness settled over everything. There was no wind, no insects, nothing but the sound of my own breathing. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. He did not seem impatient. He did not repeat himself. He just waited, as if the game had already started and I was the one slowing it down. So, I said, trying to keep things light. You said you would explain the rules? He nodded once. You have to find 3 leaves, he said. They have to be different. I glanced down at the ground. Leaves were everywhere. That part seemed easy enough. And 2 branches, he continued. But you cannot break them. They have to already be on the ground. Well, that makes sense, I said. Anything else? He paused, then added, a little brighter now. Every time you pick something up, you have to say what you have. Out loud? Yes. I waited for him to explain why, but he did not. He just stood there watching me, as if that was all there was to it. And the beak? I asked. You get that last, he said, at the edge. He pointed toward the back of the yard, where the grass faded into dirt and low brush before giving way to trees. There is really going to be a beak out there? I asked. Yes. From what? Hunters leave them. The answer came too quickly, like something memorized. I almost questioned it, but something about the way he said it made it feel pointless. All right, I said. I will go first. He nodded. I stepped away from him and looked down at the ground until I found a leaf that looked different enough from the others. I bent down, picked it up, and straightened again, turning it slightly in my fingers. One leaf, I said. Jeremy nodded, watching me closely, his eyes fixed on my hand. I moved a little farther and found another, wider and darker, its edges curled inward. I picked it up and added it to the first. 2 leaves. He nodded again, just as quietly. By the time I reached the third, I was already aware of how strange it felt. Standing in the yard, talking out loud like that, repeating words that should not matter. But I could not stop. It felt important to him. 3 leaves. Jeremy gave the same small nod. His gaze did not shift. He kept watching my hands, as if he was both listening for something precise and making sure I was doing it right. Now branches, he said. I turned toward one of the trees and spotted a thin, dry branch lying near the base. It looked like it had been there for a while. I picked it up without thinking. 1 branch, I said. Jeremy tilted his head slightly. All of it, he said. I frowned, adjusting my grip. All of it? He nodded. I let out a breath and corrected myself, forcing a small smile. 3 leaves, 1 branch. That seemed to satisfy him. I walked a few steps farther and found another branch, smaller than the first and half hidden in the grass. When I picked it up, I spoke again, a little quicker this time. 3 leaves, 2 branches. Jeremy nodded once more, slower now, as if confirming something to himself rather than to me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The quiet of the yard pressed in around us, heavier than before. Then he looked toward the woods. Now the beak, he said. I followed his gaze. The edge of the yard did not feel like a boundary anymore, just a place where things became less clear. You are really telling me there's going to be one just lying there? I asked. Yes. I hesitated, then glanced back at him. Come with me. He shook his head. You have to get it. What? Can we not go together? I am watching. That did not feel like an answer, but he did not offer anything else. I shifted the leaves and branches in my hands and started toward the edge of the yard. The ground changed as I walked, the grass thinning into patches of dirt and uneven roots. The air felt heavier there, like the warmth from the house stopped just short of reaching it. It was quiet. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that I noticed what was missing. No insects, no movement in the trees. Just that same stillness pressing in around me. I slowed down as I reached the first line of trees. Then I saw it. It was lying in the dirt a few feet ahead of me. Small. Pale. A beak. I stopped and stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There were no feathers around it, no blood. Nothing to suggest anything had happened there. It looked clean. Almost too clean. I glanced around, expecting to find something else. A body, bones, anything. There was nothing. Just the beak. Jeremy? I called, not taking my eyes off it. There actually is one here. I told you, he said. His voice was closer than I expected. I turned slightly and saw him standing a few steps behind me. I had not heard him walk over. I looked back down at the beak and crouched, reaching out to pick it up. It was lighter than I expected, smooth and intact, not broken or torn, just separate. For a moment, I just held it. Then I remembered. 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak, I said. My voice sounded louder than it should have. I started to straighten, turning slightly back toward the yard. Okay, that is Say it again. I froze. Jeremy's voice was right behind me now. I turned. He was closer than before, standing still, looking not at me, but at what I was holding. All of it, he said. I swallowed. 3 leaves, I said. 2 branches, 1 beak. He nodded slightly, but something in his expression did not change. Again. I stared at him. Why? You have to say it 3 times. His voice was flat now, the excitement from before completely gone. I looked down at the beak in my hand, then back at him. 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak, I said quietly. He smiled again, sudden and bright like before. Perfect. Now, one last thing. He ran back toward the middle of the yard, stopping at the spot where he had been standing earlier. Place them here, he said, almost bouncing in place. I walked back and knelt, setting everything down where he pointed. He immediately crouched beside them, moving quickly and carefully, arranging the pieces with surprising precision. He placed the 2 branches first, one flat, and the other angled against it. Then he set the beak at one end, and laid the leaves along the branches, spacing them evenly as if following a pattern he already knew. I watched him for a second, trying to make sense of it. What is it? I asked. He did not look up. A raven, he said. I frowned. How do you know what a raven is? There are not any around here. The cat scared them off years ago. He adjusted one of the leaves slightly, then finally looked up at me. That is just a story, he said. For a moment he smiled again, but it did not reach his eyes. They are still here. He glanced past me, toward the dark edge of the woods. Watching. At the time, I remember thinking it was just something he said to scare me. The kind of thing kids repeat when they want to sound like they know more than they actually do. I almost told him to stop. But before I could say anything, something moved. It was small enough that I might have missed it if I had not been looking directly at it. One of the leaves shifted. Not the way something falls or slides, but something slower, more deliberate. It lifted slightly, just enough to break the shape, then settled back into place. I froze. There was no wind. I could feel that clearly. The air was completely still, heavy in that way it gets at night when nothing is moving, when even the trees seem to be holding their breath. I kept staring at it, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. For a few seconds, everything stayed exactly the same. The leaves, the branches, the beak. Just a pile of things arranged on the ground. Then I looked at Jeremy. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't even looking at the ground in front of him. His eyes were fixed just past it, on the shape itself, like he was waiting for something to happen. "Did you see that?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just smiled. Not the same way as before. Not excited. Not impatient. Quieter. Like this part of it mattered more than anything we had done before. I looked back down. For a moment, nothing changed. Then one of the branches shifted. It was only a slight movement, just enough to change the angle. But it was enough. The shape no longer looked like something we had arranged. It looked like something that was holding itself together. That was when I stepped back. I told him it was enough, that the game was over, that it was too late and we were going inside. This time he didn't argue. He just nodded, like he already knew that was how it would end. I did not look back at it again. I closed the door behind us, locked it, and made sure he went upstairs. I'm writing this now, maybe an hour later, and I keep trying to tell myself it was nothing. I imagined it, that there has to be some simple explanation for what I saw. But I have not gone back outside to check, and I don't think I will. Something is making sounds outside. A slow, deliberate pecking. Not on the door. Not on the walls. Part 2. I did not sleep. I stayed in my room with the door locked, listening. The sound didn't stop. It came and went, never staying long enough for me to get used to it, never stopping long enough for me to forget it was there. Slow, deliberate. At some point, the light outside started to change. The dark shifted into something softer, and I realized it was morning. I heard the kids and went downstairs. Jeremy was already sitting at the table, eating breakfast. He did not look at me. He did not say anything. For a moment, I just stood there before sitting down across from him. He kept eating, quiet, like he had been the past 3 days. I didn't say anything either. We sat there for a few minutes without speaking. After a while, he finished, got up, and went upstairs. He didn't look at me when he passed by. I waited a bit before moving. I found Josh and Jonathan later getting ready. I stayed by the door for a second before saying anything. "Hey," I said. They both looked at me. "Does Jeremy ever go outside at night?" "Sometimes," Josh said. "Yeah," Jonathan added. "Why?" I shook my head. "I don't know. He asked me something yesterday." "What?" I hesitated. Game," I said. "Something with leaves and branches." They were quiet for a second, then Josh added, "Oh, that. He plays that sometimes," Jonathan said. "Sometimes?" I repeated. "Every now and then," Josh said. "Only at night," Jonathan added. I nodded slightly. "Does he always ask someone else to play?" "Yeah," Josh said. "He doesn't do it himself." "What do you mean?" "He doesn't pick anything up," Jonathan said. "He just tells you what to do." "And then?" "He fixes it," Josh said. "At the end." They said it like it didn't matter, like it was just something he did. "And the stuff?" I asked. "The leaves, the branches?" "It's just there," Jonathan said. I hesitated. "Do you know where he learned it?" "Some kid showed him," Jonathan said. "What kid?" "I don't know." There was a short pause. "I think it was someone from school," Josh said. Jonathan shook his head. "No, it wasn't." They didn't say anything else after that. I didn't ask anything else either. I went outside after that. The yard looked the same as it had the day before. The grass, the dirt, the edge of the woods. I walked to the spot where Jeremy had arranged everything. There was nothing there. No leaves, no branches, no beak. I stood there for a bit, looking at the ground, expecting to notice something I had missed. There wasn't anything to notice. Not even a mark. I moved around the area, checking from different angles, like that might make something appear. It didn't. I tried to remember exactly how it had looked, where each piece had been, how close I had been standing. I knew it. I was sure I knew it. But the more I tried to picture it, the less clear it felt. Like something I had already gone over too many times. Like it had been worn down. I stayed there longer than I meant to. I stopped trying after a while. The image didn't really go away either. Even when I wasn't thinking about it directly, it was still there. That same spot in the yard. That same shape I couldn't quite put back together. Every time I got close to it, something didn't line up. Something small, but enough to notice. I sat down inside and tried again, this time slower. Just the branches first. I could see those. One against the ground, the other slightly raised. That part felt right. Then the leaves. I knew there were 3. I tried to place them, but it didn't work. I adjusted them in my head, moved them around, tried different positions. None of it felt correct. I stayed like that longer than I meant to, going over it again and again, trying to get it right. After a while, it started to feel harder to focus. Not suddenly, just a slow pressure building behind my eyes. I leaned back slightly and closed them for a moment, but the image didn't go away. If anything, it stayed clearer there. The branches. The empty space where the leaves should have been. That was when I noticed the sound. Faint at first, easy to ignore. I opened my eyes. The house was quiet. I stayed still, listening. I shifted in my seat and tried to let it go. Then it came again. A soft tap. I looked around trying to place it. It didn't come from the walls. It didn't come from the floor. I turned my head slightly. Nothing. I pressed my fingers lightly against my temple without thinking. The pressure there had changed. I kept them there for a few seconds. Then it happened again. A tap under my fingers. I pulled my hand away. The room stayed quiet. I sat there for a while, trying to think of a reason. Lack of sleep. That had to be it. I stood up, walked around, listened again, then sat back down. The sound came back. This time it didn't stop after one. Tap, pause, tap. Longer pause. Then again. Slow. Even. I stayed still, listening, trying to follow it without thinking about it. After a while, it started to feel familiar. Not the sound itself, the spacing, the pauses between each one. Like there was a pattern to it. I closed my eyes again, not on purpose this time, just to focus. Tap, pause, tap, longer pause, then again. I stayed like that, counting without meaning to, trying to match it to something. At some point I realized I had already heard it before. Not like this, but close enough. I opened my eyes. For a second I couldn't place it. Then it clicked. The way he had made me say it. Out loud. Each part separate. Each one spaced out. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. But it was already there. 3 leaves. Pause. 2 branches. Longer pause. 1 beak. I tried to stop. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't move my lips. But it didn't matter. It kept repeating, matching the sound. Tap, pause, tap. It's still happening. It hasn't stopped. I don't know if it's going to stop. I don't know if I did something wrong or if this is just part of it. I keep thinking about what Jonathan said, that he doesn't pick anything up. that he just tells you what to do and then fixes it. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's finished or if something's missing. I haven't gone back outside. I don't want to. I don't think I should. The sound changes sometimes. Not faster, not louder, just closer. Like it doesn't need to travel as far. I don't know how else to explain that. I keep thinking about that question, the one he asked me. The first thing he ever said. I didn't think it mattered. It feels different now. So I guess I'll ask it too. Have you ever played 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak? There's Something Wrong with the Wickenshire House by Random Appellation 468. And if you would like to check out more of the author's stories, you can go to his profile, linked in the description, where he'll also be posting about a future book release. And you're listening to Creepypasta. The blaring of my cell phone jolted me awake, and I sat up with a groan. Getting too old for this. In front of my ragged couch, the TV continued with its black and white parade of old footage from a World War I documentary, though the war seemed nearly over now. Judging by the digital clock on the mantelpiece, which read 3:49 a.m., I'd been asleep for at least 5 hours. My body ached, a familiar problem in my age, but enough that I chided myself for not going to bed earlier, like a responsible person. It had been a long day, so I came home to a cold shower, a few hot dogs warmed in the microwave, and settled down to watch some television before bed. Of course, at 55 years old, I'd misjudged how tired I really was, and spent close to half the night slumped on my sofa, which meant I would be paying for it in the morning with stiff joints and a sore back. Palming my cracked Motorola from the coffee table, I found the TV remote and hit the mute button as I answered the call. Hello? Shaky breathing grated on the other end, and after a few moments, a girl's hushed voice whispered through. Mr. Todd? Ice rippled through my veins at the sound of Cindy's panicked voice, and I sat up straighter to rub at my bleary eyes. Yeah, I'm here. Are you okay? What's wrong? Silence greeted me. A strange mix of static, trembling breaths, and what sounded like sniffles as she tried holding back tears. Please, help me. Cindy? Concern building in my mind, I switched on a nearby lamp and pulled myself from the couch with a grunt at the tightness in my lower back. Are you there? What's going on? More shaky gasps, and just over the static, I thought I heard the faint sound of melodic humming in the background. Something's wrong, Cindy whispered, her words so quiet that they made each breath sound like cannon fire. The woods are... Something fell out of the sky and... It was so loud it woke me up. There's a fire. Brow furrowed, I moved fast for the kitchen, stumbling through the dark interior of my little cabin to grope for the light switch. Stay calm, just stay calm and talk to me. You said there's a fire? How far away? Can you get to your car? Another sniffle came through, clogged with harsh interference as the signal weakened, a sound that made my veins throb with tension. I can't. Something's here. It's in the house. It's in the house with me. We can't get out. My throat tried to close up, and I gulped hard against a wave of nausea. Someone broke in. Are you hurt? Where's Aaron? A long pause, and in the background of the mute static, I could have sworn the humming sound cut out, as though whoever it was stopped their eerie melody all at once. She's gone. Something in Cindy's tone changed, as if the fear drained away to a blank, emotionless rasp, and the line went dead with a chilling click. Every inch of my body racked with a shiver, and both feet seemed glued to the floor in a strange form of dread. Like so many girls before them, Cindy Fodero and Erin Martinelli had been hired on to be caretakers and actors in the Wickenshire Living History estate. Erin was 19, studying to be a nurse, while Cindy had just graduated high school and wanted to be a teacher. They were good kids, calm, intelligent, and great workers. Though I never had any children, they were like daughters of my own. They even baked a cake for my birthday in June. Once they called me in for a leaky pipe, but only after they had done their best to fix it themselves with a toolkit I'd left in the stairwell cupboard. Smart little troopers that they were, the girls even had the common sense to shut the correct valve off and found the leak on their own. Had it been anyone else, I might have considered this to be a prank, a joke, some dumb idea made by bored kids to get a new video for their social media nonsense. But I knew Cindy and Erin. They didn't pull pranks like this. Unnerved, I tried to redial her number, but got no answer. Erin's number yielded the same result, and I shook my head at myself. Screw it, I'm not taking any chances. I was midway through yanking my work boots on when the sheriff picked up. Hello? From the gruffness in his words, I could tell he'd been asleep as well, but I couldn't waste time with the standard 911 procedures. David, it's me. I cinched down the laces on my boots and grabbed my Carhartt jacket from its hook by the door. Cindy just called from the Wickenshire place. There's a fire on the mountain, and I think someone's broke into the house. I'm headed there now. Rustling on the opposite end of the phone let me know David was up, likely going through the same motions as myself. The son of a Polish man and a Kootenai woman, David Kowalski and I had known each other since high school, and even played football on the same team. Nicknamed White Cloud for his European features and Native American blood, he was stubborn with a quick temper, but tenacious when it came to his job. As a lawman, he drove his deputies relentlessly, backed them to the hilt when it came to any court battles, and as a result he'd managed to keep the crime in Jacob's Fork quite low over the years. We didn't always see eye to eye on everything, but I knew I could count on him when it came to something like this. If Cindy or Erin were in danger, Sheriff Kowalski would ride through hell and back to get them out, which was exactly the kind of man I needed right now. Yeah, I'll get on the horn to a few of my boys and have them meet you there, he replied. And I heard the zipping of a coat on his end, along with a metallic ch-click of a handgun slide being racked. Fire teams are going to need time to get spun up, so whatever happens, don't go wandering off without letting me know. Last thing I want is us getting caught in the flames if they decide to move down the mountain. I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me and kept the phone pressed to my ear as I swiped my truck keys from the porcelain ashtray near the front door. Got it. Be careful, Andy. His voice hitched in a low pause, as if the sheriff himself had as bad a feeling about this as I did, and he hung up. Rain pattered on the windshield of my ancient pickup truck as I wound my way through the dark back roads of northern Idaho, the night sky black with the clouds of late fall. On the sun-faded seat next to me lay my work kit, a simple heavy-duty canvas tool bag that held various tools, keys, a flashlight, and an old revolver handed down to me from my grandfather. I used the tools in my job every day as the groundskeeper, janitor, and fix-it-all handyman for the Wickenshire house, which had been part of our small town for as long as anyone could remember. Set on a picturesque 103 acres of fields and woodland in the shadow of the nearby Smoke Point Mountain, the Wickenshire house was a rare example of Eastern architecture in the far reaches of the American West. It was the property of our town's oldest resident, Mr. Edward J. Watkins, a kindly, if forgetful soul, who'd seen 91 years on this earth and still could drive his own car, though he had a little trouble with stairs. He lived in a cottage on the western edge of town, but I wasn't about to call him at this time of night, even for something so urgent. Knowing Ed Watkins, he would try to drive out to the house with his slippers on and get hurt tumbling around in the flames. Or run into whatever scumbag is in the house, God forbid. On the horizon, some of the clouds began to glow, an orange flicker that widened on the mountain side as the distant fire spread. I could barely glimpse an old plume of smoke in the sky, not curved upward from the fire, but downward in a long arc backlit by the flames. Looking at it, I had a momentary lapse of courage, my resolve wavering. Cindy had said something fell from the sky. This looked like a trail of some kind, maybe a crashed plane or a fallen weather balloon. If there was jet fuel on the ground, the fire would be even worse to put out than usual. It was horrible, rotten luck all the way round. A wildfire on the same night the house had its first break-in, while the girls were there alone. Adrenaline pumping, I sped up the lonely gravel trail to the house, one of the final sections of public roadways that got this close to the mountain. The Wickenshire house reared from the gloom ahead, its tall gates and Victorian gables illuminated by the dual halos of my truck's headlights. It still took my breath away, the ornate beauty of the place, built as if every stone had been placed by a perfectionist's hand. It stood at 2 stories in height, built from stone mined at the local quarry, with multiple chimneys, a balcony overlooking the back garden, and a grand front porch that wrapped halfway around the entire structure. A stone wall encircled the main grounds, with a wrought iron gate at the drive and several ornamental gardens interspersed throughout. Plush lawns stretched in between, and there were a few oak trees planted there for their brilliant colors in the fall. A small garage had been built around the back of the house sometime in the 1960s, but this mainly held the riding lawnmower and a small shop where I did most of my repair work. Cindy and Aaron's cars were parked back there, the front gravel lot reserved for visitors during the daily tours. I didn't see any other vehicle that the intruder might have used, but something else caught my attention in that moment and held it with a pull like gravity. Lord have mercy. I stared slack-jawed at a huge sea of flames that roared through the nearby trees with a ferocious appetite. The fire hadn't wasted any time, chewing through the wet growth as if the rain had never fell, evergreens crackling as they burned to dust in minutes. The heat came through my windshield in a steady increase, warm enough that I couldn't tell the difference between the fire and my truck heater. The open grassy slopes around the house were consumed as the flames inched closer to the building. The fire closed in from both east and west. Bounding from my truck, I dashed up to the front door and pulled the handles. The polished brass knobs rattled but didn't turn, the flames licking their way across the prairie grass outside the ornate courtyard walls. Locked. That means our scumbag didn't break in through here. Maybe you went around the back? With shaking hands, I put down the canvas tool bag and dug in it for my key ring. Sirens began to wail in the distance, and I finally managed to force the doors open, leaving the keys in the lock to snatch my aged pistol. Cindy? I produced a flashlight with my left hand to hold it beneath my gun, and swept the beam of it over the murky interior. Erin? Where are you? I'd been in the house countless times over the years, but in that moment it felt suffocating, like a great stony maw waiting for me to go far enough in so as to swallow me whole. The foyer led to a large room with a grand staircase, doorways on either side opening to the main dining room and a sitting room respectively. Signs and velvet ropes were posted to guide visitors through the proper areas. A gift shop in the rear of the house near the old parlor, along with guest bathrooms added on to the original back porch. With all the lights off, it looked alien, surreal for this part of the country with its Eastern Victorian mystique, and my skin prickled at the sensation that there were eyes in every shadow. Of course, I had been stupid to yell. I'd let my panic get the better of me, and now I had given away the element of surprise. If some creep was in the house somewhere with Erin or Cindy doing God knows what, I wouldn't be able to sneak up on him now. All right then. Might as well move fast. With the old revolver grasped in my trembling hands, I headed for the stairs and took them 3 at a time. The wood creaked under my steps, ancient chestnut and oak that had been sawn before the Great Depression, each footfall like a cannon in the silent house. From here, the roar of the fire outside seemed a muffled whisper, as though there were 2 different realities, and the house stood guard between them. However, I remembered the heat coming through the windshield of my pickup and knew I didn't have much time. Soon the house would be in flames, the fire outside enough to melt glass and ignite the wooden siding in minutes. I reached the top of the stairs and swept my flashlight beam down both ends of the corridor at the top, uncertain of which direction to go first. Cindy and Erin were roomed down the hall to the left, but if someone had indeed broken into the house, Cindy might have hid somewhere else. Every second wasted could mean life or death, and I realized that either way I'd be turning my back to the unknown. Something flickered in the beam of my light, a brief wisp of shadow that jerked back behind the far corner of the right side hallway. I didn't have more than a moment to see clear details, but there was enough of an image burned into my mind that it came to me in a cold rush. A face. Kowalski, you'd better get here soon. Swallowing, I paced down the hallway, my handgun leveled on the spot where the shadow had been. Upon reaching it, I inched in a wide arc around the corner, bracing for a figure to jump out at me. The air caught in my throat, and I stared at a section of wallpaper bathed in the aura of my flashlight. Brownish black sludge had been daubed on the wall, smeared into a perfect circle so that the excess dripped over the wallpaper like ebony tears. I couldn't tell if it was mud, blood, or something else, but the corridor stank of rot and the putrid scent of stagnant water. Thorny bits of twig had been woven together, tied here and there with bits of plant fiber to form a circle that overlaid the sludge. Pasted together on the wall, these seemed to make up a protective ring, and in the middle were the handprint. From what I could see, they were 2 different sizes, slender fingers and narrow palms indicating 2 younger females. both prints face downwards, slightly overlapping each other at the heel of the palm, and the thumbs arced toward one another like pincers. Unlike the grimy sludge, these were pressed to the old wallpaper in an unmistakable red hue, and it hit me what I was looking at. A spider. The 4 fingers of each hand made the legs, the thumbs its mandibles. Upon closer inspection, I discovered the blackness of the outer paste came from petals. Rose petals, to be exact. There were no roses growing in Idaho this time of year, yet I'd never seen a natural black rose in my life, yet these appeared fresh. Most had been ground to a powder that gave the foul substance its dark color. Others pushed into the muck like decorative flair, giving a strange, heady undertone to the mixture. With this discovery came more clarity. The thorny twigs glued into the circle were not random. They spread inward toward the spider, forming a sharp web of spikes that enshrined it, with the careful touch of an artisan. Such a display would have taken hours to make, certainly longer than the time it took for Cindy to call me. How is this possible? Mr. Todd! I nearly jumped out of my skin, the horrific cry echoing from somewhere behind me, Cindy's voice tinged in pain and fear. No sooner had I turned, running a short distance back toward the main corridor at the top of the stairs, and the voice cut out with a high, agonized scream. Cindy! I charged toward the girl's room, heart pounding in my chest. Help me! Back in the direction of the symbol, Aaron's voice rang out, choked with sobs and full of torment. Mr. Todd, please! Acidic bewilderment slithered through my mind, and I skidded to a stop, caught in the middle of the hallway, the staircase just to my left. I'd been so close, perhaps a door away from Aaron only moments ago. Could there be more than one intruder holding the girls in separate rooms? Cindy is closest. I have to get to her. She sounds like she's hurt. Teeth gritted against the screams of Aaron. I forced myself through the left side hallway, her voice ringing in my ears as she begged for my help. At the end of the hall, I reached the rooms given to the girls and lunged for the handle to Cindy's. It didn't turn, locked from the inside. Backing up, I drove the heel of my boot into the door next to the lock and heard the old wood splinter. Any other time I would have balked at such destruction, these doors being over 80 years old, but it didn't matter anymore. What the fire didn't get would not be worth Cindy or Aaron's lives. The door swung open to slap against the bedroom wall, and I dashed inside, revolver in hand. What the... Within the quiet interior of the bedroom, everything looked untouched. The curtains partially open, the bed rumpled from where Cindy had gotten up to check the window, a discarded work uniform in the clothes hamper by the door. Dark-stained wood trim lined the walls, windows, and doorways, the walls papered with a robin egg blue pattern that gave it an airy feeling. The wide lacy curtains wafted like clouds in the slight draft that came in the open hallway door, and the vintage hot water heater gurgled in the corner as steam worked its way through the pipes. There were modern touches as well. More lamps and lights plugged into the discrete electrical outlets in the walls, a small television on its stand across from the bed, and a side door opened to a shared bathroom between Cindy's room and Aaron's. This room wasn't open to tourists, as it was the private living quarters for our workers, so such things were permissible here, as opposed to other parts of the house. Nothing seemed out of place. but there was no sign of Cindy anywhere. No clues to indicate that she'd been there moments ago. It was as if she'd gotten out of bed, looked out the window, and vanished into thin air. In a flurry of movement, I checked under the bed, in the closet, and the bathroom. When those came back clean, I broke through the bathroom door into Erin's room, only to find more of the same. There was no sign of the girls anywhere. "Mr. Todd, please!" Erin's screams continued from the opposite end of the long corridor, and I flung open the bedroom door to retrace my mad dash in her direction, confusion and frustration mounting. Rounding the corner that bore the strange mark on the wall, I swayed to a stop on the old floorboards next to the door where her screams had come from and yanked on the knob. "You've got to be kidding me. How many doors did they lock before I got here?" With a gasp of exertion, I backed up to kick the door in like the last one, muscles tensed for the effort. "Mr. Todd!" Cindy's cries exploded from the doorway behind me, rabid and intense as the door rattles on its hinges like she was throwing herself against it from within the room. I froze, staring at the door, heart racing as my mind whirled. How could she be in there? I'd heard Cindy on the other side of the house not 5 minutes ago. There was no way she could have moved that fast, not without going past me. I would have seen her in the hall, would have heard the ancient doors creaking on their hinges as they opened. She couldn't be in there. "Please help me!" Erin's screams started up again, but this time from somewhere in the left side hallway, and another door began to groan in muted thuds as if she too were trying to break it down. A dry fear crept into my throat, different than what I'd known coming into the house. This didn't make sense. Erin's voice had been coming from the door I stood ready to break into, but now it was to my left. Cindy's had been coming from her room in the west wing, but now called from the door behind me. Neither could have left their respective rooms without entering the hall, and I knew for a fact that there weren't any old-fashioned servant entrances anywhere that could have let them move unnoticed. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Shaken, I took a step away from the door that echoed with Cindy's voice. "Cindy?" "Mr. Todd!" she begged from the other side of the oak planking, the wood slamming against the jamb with wild urgency. "Please help me! Please!" The door is locked." I tried not to hyperventilate as I watched the knob rattle in its socket, knowing fully well the lock was on her side of the door. "Can you let me in?" Her wails increased in pitch. The screech is an awful combination of agony and terror that made my stomach churn. It sounded as if Cindy was being tormented in the worst way imaginable, but something about the cadence of each shriek felt off, enough that my brain sent up warning alarms inside my skull. "Mr. Todd, please!" she pleaded once more, the same words both girls kept using in various rearrangements over and over, the door shuddering under each blow she made. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and I sucked in a breath, eyes focused on the doorknob as it clacked back and forth, like Cindy wanted to open it but couldn't. An uncanny thought rose in my mind, bone-chilling in its clarity, growing louder and louder so that it burst from me before I could stop it. "Cindy!" I gripped my flashlight so hard that my knuckles turned white. "What's my first name?" Like a thunderclap, Cindy's pleas ceased, along with Erin's, so that the entire house fell into dead silence. Nothing moved, and even the muffled roar of the wildfire outside seemed deadened further than before, as though the house was a vacuum of sound. My skin crawled, the air thick in my lungs, and a strange certainty took hold of me that made the sense of dread even worse as Cindy's words about Aaron trickled through my brain. She's gone. Click. To my right, a doorknob at the far end of the hallway unlocked. Click. Another lock slid open, this one closer, the door remaining shut as more joined them one by one. Click, click, click. A twinge of panic tightened in my throat, but I leveled the beam of my flashlight at the first door that had unlocked, blood surging in my temples. Everything seemed loud. The heartbeat in my chest, the breath in my lungs, the groan of the floorboards under my boots. My vision narrowed. A vibration hummed to life inside my skull, and I tasted metal on my tongue. In my hand, the flashlight began to flicker as if the batteries were struggling to remain lit, and I couldn't lift the revolver, my arms refusing to move like the gun weighed as much as a car. The locks carried on past me, every door on the second story unlocking itself in a continuous march, until at last, the final click resounded from the far hallway like cannon fire to my ears. For a moment, the silence returned, so thick it may as well have been water. Wham! Every door on the second story flung open, impacting against the wall inside their respective rooms so hard that I heard plaster crunch, the hinges squealing on old dust. With them came the screams. There were hundreds of voices, some human, others less so, bellowing at the top of their lungs to be heard over one another. If they were saying any words, they were lost among the throng, a constant roar of vocals that soured in my ears for the sheer volume of it. Somewhere among the morass, I could barely catch the sound of Aaron and Cindy's voices shrieking with the others, a morbid choir of pain, suffering, and fear. It seemed to seep out of the floorboards, ooze from the heater vents, and rebound off the walls in every direction. With the doors open, the deep orange glow of the flames outside poured into the house like a tidal wave. But oddly enough, no heat came with it, the hallway as cold as if I'd stepped into a freezer. The shadows elongated in the firelight, swaying as they inched up the papered walls, and a pungent smell followed them. Roses. It came with overpowering strength, sickly sweet but unmistakable. As the tide of shadows advanced down the hall toward me, the fermented stink of roses filled the air like poison gas, and I tasted copper on my lips. I have to get out of here. Coughing on the blood running from both nostrils, I stumbled toward the stairs, my head a mess of static. Like a tide of slithering vines, the inky shadows pursued me with a ravenous hunger. I could feel their magnetic pull, the chorus of screams still ringing across the house with a deafening volume, a terrible siren song that tugged at something deep within my subconscious. Voices. So many voices, begging me to stay, to go back, to find the darkest room and sink myself into the abyss until it drowned me. Something tightened on my ankle just as I reached the top of the staircase, and I toppled headlong down the steps. Bam! My hip rammed into a banister and I lost my grip on the pistol. Wham! Another step hit my shoulder, and I felt my teeth bite into my tongue, the flashlight clattering away into the floor below. Smack! My head connected with the floorboards at the landing, and the blackness threatened to close over my eyes for the last time. Creak. One of the steps flexed under the weight of a foot, and I gulped air in pain to squint at the shadows. Creak. Another footstep echoed toward me, something at the top of the steps descending with a slow, methodical gait. It didn't sound heavy, not the deft pace of a large man or thick boot, but almost delicate, light, graceful. Yet, there was something about each carefully placed step, each sigh and squeak of the aged woodwork that made my skin wriggle. Something was coming. Something that knew exactly where I was, even in the pitch blackness of the house. It was watching me, stalking me through the shadows like a cat with a mouse. Desperate fear surged in my brain, and I clawed through the dark on my stomach to find a way out. I last remembered the front door being nearby, but it seemed to take an eternity to move across the cold floorboards, the unseen presence mere yards behind me as I wriggled forward. At last, I managed to gain my footing, though it hurt to put weight on my right leg, and hurled myself forward in the blind shadows. Thud. Both front doors flew open, and I tumbled out onto the porch, rolling down the steps into the stones of the walkway. Like a switch had been thrown, the world seemed to come alive once more, the cold sensation fading, the sound returning. Sirens wailed closer as headlights appeared in the long gravel driveway, and the crackle of flames roared from the trees. Smoke filled my nostrils. Heat from the nearby fire licked over my skin, and I rolled onto my side to look back toward the house. My lungs tightened, and I stared, unable to pull my eyes away. Inside the open front doorway, nothing was visible. Not the glint of firelight from inside, not the faint glow of it coming through any ground windows. The entrance was a mass of impenetrable shadows that seemed to form a solid wall at the threshold. Yet deep within that abyss, something stared back. It had no shape, no form that I could identify it with, but there was definitely a presence that stood just beyond the light, watching me from the gloom. My eyes seemed fastened to it, either by my own primordial fear, or perhaps willed so by whatever peered out of the wretched expanse. A torrent of emotions ripped through my mind, warped and misshapen, like cold fingers pried at the taps of my humanity to unleash a maelstrom of feeling. Hunger and fear, hate and despair, lust and sadness, grief and pain. They all rolled over one another, tumbling in and out of each other in a never-ending tide. And it hit me with a strangled form of clarity that these weren't my emotions. Locked in place by the unknown being's gaze, I couldn't move, couldn't so much as cry out. My only option to fight back with what little expression I had left. What are you? Something about my terrified thoughts seemed to strike a chord within the cascade of terrible shadow. For the next instant, the doors on the house creaked in their wrought iron hinges, and then swung shut on their own. The rest of the night was a blur, a stupor, one that I wandered through in a mindless fog. Firefighting crews appeared from miles around to help put out the blaze, but not before it trued through all 103 acres on the Wickenshire estate. Every tree, every bush, every blade of grass was burned to cinders. Even boulders cracked from the intense heat. The smoke pall so large it could be seen from Montana, or so I heard. One of the fire trucks exploded when its fuel tank caught fire and killed 3 men. Everything burned, except the house. For some reason, the fire stopped at the stone courtyard walls and went no further. In a blaze hot enough that it had turned some minor sand pits on the mountain to crude glass. There wasn't so much as a scorch mark on the house or its outbuildings. None of the paint peeled. The siding wasn't so much as worn to the touch, and all the plants within the yard were unscathed. The investigators couldn't even find ash on the roof from the fire afterwards. Not a single flake. Unlike its ruined acreage, the Wickenshire house had survived the wildfire unharmed, and no one could make any sense of it. Once the fire was finally put out, they took me to the local clinic for my injuries. A sprained ankle, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion from my tumble down the stairs. Sheriff Kowalski visited in the morning to see how I was and fill me in on what I'd missed once they trucked me away from the site. Over 300 search and rescue volunteers had been called out, along with special forensics teams from neighboring counties, and they hadn't found any sign of Cindy Fodro or Aaron Martinelli. The last time they managed to ping Cindy's phone via satellite, it had registered a mile up the slope from the house, but they never managed to recover the device. Tracking dogs refused to go near the house and seemed to lose all scent once they left the property boundaries. No trace of Aaron was discovered, and no DNA could be found in either of the girls' rooms to point to a culprit. One of the searchers claimed he had heard what sounded like a female voice screaming for help on the northern slope, but he wasn't sure where it had come from, and no one else could verify it. Another man claimed he saw someone walking inside the tree line near the eastern edge of the property, but never got a good glimpse of their face to see who they were. With all speculation bereft of evidence, it seemed to everyone that both Cindy and Aaron had disappeared from the face of the earth. Worse yet, when I described my account to the sheriff, he informed me that his team hadn't found any symbols painted on the walls, nor did they see anything out of the ordinary. All they found that aligned with my story was the strange, overwhelming aroma of roses that permeated the house. Nothing more. That was 6 weeks ago. I got out of the clinic within a few days after the event, but the continued search efforts proved fruitless. With their investigation coming up cold, the sheriff's office released the house back to Mr. Watkins, who closed it indefinitely. I had never seen him so distraught in my life, as Ed took the girl's disappearance rather hard. He felt personally responsible, though we all knew there wasn't anything he could have done, especially since no one knew what happened to Aaron or Cindy. However, Ed apparently decided to go there himself late one evening to do some looking around the house and didn't bother to tell anyone else. It wasn't until his cleaning lady stopped by his cottage in Jacob's Fork the next morning that Ed was reported missing and police dispatched to the Wickenshire house. They never found him. His car was parked out front, the doors unlocked, but they couldn't find a trace of Edward Watkins anywhere on the property. I helped with the search, as I basically slept in the sheriff's office these days and found no sign of a struggle or any other foul play. Only the smell of roses. We dug deep this time, rifled through the local records, archives, property history, everything we could get our hands on about the estate. There was nothing to indicate this place would be trouble. No forgotten building plans with hidden rooms. No land disputes with older tenants. No tribal issues from burial grounds or holy sites. This property was normal, and even when I poked around to see if there had been any deaths, suicides, or other sordid affairs associated with the house, my search came up blank. There was no reason for this to happen, not from human effort, or anything else. Even now, as December drags on, nothing has been the same. No plants grow in the burn zone, not even the smallest patch of lichen or moss, as if the ground is poisoned to its core. Animals avoid it, so that the uncharted sections of forest around the property are empty, silent places. The access road is chained off to keep curious locals away, and Sheriff Kowalski let me bunk at a small ranger cabin at the base of the mountain just so I could keep tabs on the place. I think he knew I needed to be close, to keep an eye on the house, and keep looking for answers. I can't explain why, but I know something is in there, waiting, biding its time. It failed to get me that night, but I have a terrible premonition that it doesn't need me. It just needs more. I've found markers in the last few days. Piles of bones. Not haphazard from an animal kill, but stacked, organized, purposeful. Bits of twine made from plant fibers holding them together. And despite being in the open, no animals will bother them, not even the vultures. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. They think I can't process the girls being gone, but I've stumbled on over a dozen of them now. They seem to be set in a wide ring around the property line, spanning outward from the house into the forest beyond, capturing more territory by the day. No matter how many times I remove them, the piles always reappear, with fresh bones added to the stacks. I don't touch them anymore, and I don't even make eye contact with the eye sockets of the skulls. The few times I have, I heard whispers in my sleep and had nightmares of eyes in the shadows of my room. Some of the bones are like those of a rabbit or mole, while others are bigger like elk or bear. Every pile is topped with a skull, most of them from small game, but 5 of the piles hold unique skulls. A bear, a coyote, an eagle, a snake, and lastly, a great bull elk. They are laid out opposite one another, ringing the house, the rest of the smaller markers ranging from them into the forest beyond. Of all the markers, the one with the elk skull is tallest, its full spread of antlers still intact so that it is 9 feet high at the eye sockets. I found a symbol painted onto the bone forehead with powdered charcoal that the rain never seems to wash away, no matter how many times I go up to it. A spider. One made of 2 slender, inverted hands, both the same size. I'm posting this so that it's on record, in case one of these days I don't come back from that mountain. Service was always spotty up there before, but ever since that night it's been non-existent. Even the few trail cameras I've put out have either gone dead or produced nothing but blurry photos. Something is building these markers, watching me whenever I walk the perimeter, and shifting in the corners of my vision whenever I turn my head. I've discovered trail signs that have been purposefully moved to misdirect me. Sometimes I hear screams in the woods, distant and warped, but they sound like Aaron's cries. I see flashes of blonde hair in the bushes that I want to believe is Cindy, but I know it can't be. They're gone. Both of them. Only the sheriff understands, even if he doesn't say much to that effect. I can see it in his eyes. He knows that I'm telling the truth, and his own deputies have been up to the house to see the piles multiple times. There's nothing they can do. Nothing but wait from the valley below, and hope that the snow buries whatever it is for the winter. There's something wrong with the Wickenshire house. Something inside it. Something unseen that walks the grounds day and night. It wants more than the estate. I can feel it, can taste it in the wind, hear it in the dry crunch of snow under my boots, and feel it in the shivers I get every time I look at the dark, barren windows of that cursed structure. It wants the forest, the trees, the mountain. It wants everything. I tried to rush a bonsai by Bilbo Cheated, and you're listening to Creepypasta. I think I have time to write this. Things have calmed down for now. I have my chair wedged against the door, just in case. There's tapping at the window. I'm on the second floor of my house, and there used to be no trees outside my window. I need to find a way out, and this message needs to get out so no one makes the same mistakes. We have to go back a few months for you to understand. I just moved to this new rental home. The only issue is that the landlord did not allow pets, which seemed criminal with the large fenced-in yard. I asked anyway. "No pets," he said. "I've been burned before." "What if I kept up the garden?" I asked. "Would that change anything?" "About the dog? No." "What about the rent?" He looked out at the yard like he was already disappointed with the job I would do. "Spring and summer only," he said. "That's when the yard will need work. If it starts looking like hell, the discount goes away." "Yes, sir." "Tools are in the basement." That should have been the end of it. Discounted rent and some yard work. But I still wanted something to scratch that itch. Bonsai was an option. I'd never really considered it before, but I went all in watching videos, reading forums, buying those expensive little pruners. I learned about wiring trunks, exposing roots, and shaping miniature trees over the years. That was the issue. Years. Most of it just waiting around, especially in the first couple of years. Decades pass before you have anything impressive. Some trees are relatively faster growing. I still wanted the satisfaction of growing the tree from a seed, but I just didn't have the patience for it. One night I decided to buy seeds. I had to go deep into Google to find non-sponsored links. I wanted seeds from a specialty vendor. On about page 9, I clicked on a site. I can't remember the name, but it had to do with accelerated seed stock and touted seeds that can produce mature-looking bonsai in months. The site looked old, with a white screen, grainy pictures, and blue links. I clicked on one photo link that looked like a Chinese elm. There were no Latin names that I recognized on the site. I am embarrassed by the price I ended up paying. The product had all 5-star reviews, so I was hopeful. One of the most peculiar details that I can remember is returns only accepted in original soil and original shipping container. I bought a packet of 3 for a discounted rate and never received a confirmation email. I got back on the site the next morning, and that listing was gone. I thought it was a scam and got a new debit card to be safe. 2 weeks passed, and I was surprised by a small but heavy box on my doorstep. The outer cardboard shipping box didn't seem to be postmarked, but I was too excited to care. The inner box was wooden and closed with a brass clasp. The inside was lined with a grayish-blue metal. At the top of the small container, there was an instruction card. Germination stock 3. Use dehydrated soil puck. Enclosed. Keep contained indoors. Do not overwater. Keep in a well-ventilated location. Do not allow root access beyond pot. Odd? Yes. But I laughed this off at the time as some branding gimmick. The seeds themselves were larger than I had expected, and I noticed they were warm when I planted them in a small pot in the corner of my den near the floor vent. After a week, I thought I'd been scammed. No growth. But one morning, I woke up to a small green stalk. Finally, one was successful. From there, things seemed normal but fast. Within a few weeks, it had a tiny trunk with a branching structure ready to be wired and shaped. I was so happy with the results so far, I wanted to leave a review, but I couldn't find the site. I was so pleased that I even started posting photos to show off the growth. My friends were impressed, and the internet thought I was either lying about the age or accusing me of buying it from a nursery. One commenter even suggested that I had misidentified the tree species. These accusations didn't make me angry. They made me proud of my work. It was worth every penny. Soon it was time for pruning to shape the limbs. I spent some time studying the tree before making my first cut. When I did, dark sap began to ooze from the wound. My mouth began to taste as if I had just swallowed my car keys. I hope it isn't diseased. I took all the precautions, I thought. I opened the pruners around the second branch. Before I could close them, another branch snapped across the back of my hand. It cut me like a bad paper cut. I told myself, maybe I bumped it and shifted the branches. Or maybe it's a draft. The AC just came on. I finally managed to prune it properly, but I was worried about the sap's smell. But it did its job and sealed up the wounds I caused, and by morning the tree had pushed out new buds from the pruned branches. A few weeks later, the tree had grown enough that I wanted to move it to a larger, nicer bonsai pot. Repotting would also let me expose part of the root system. I thought it would enhance the beauty of the tree. I could also use this to change to a premium bonsai soil mix. I was surprised by the weight of the pot. I had to use twice as much strength as I thought to even get it off the table. I almost dropped everything when I encountered more resistance. As I looked back, I noticed the thick, pale roots had grown through the drainage holes. As I tracked it, my eyes traced over to the air vent. The roots had gone between the grates and down into the vent. I didn't want to hurt the tree. Bonsai roots can be delicate and are vital to the health of the plant. I didn't want all of this to go to waste. I tried to gently tug it free, but it wouldn't budge. On a closer look, there was a network of pale roots snaking into the darkness of the ductwork. On the one hand, I could just leave it alone, but I want this in the new pot, and I can't have roots growing into the HVAC system. I decided to cut it, and when I did, the roots seemed to recoil, and the detached side fell into the ductwork. That sharp metal taste filled my mouth. And with that taken care of, the rest of the potting went well. The tree was in its new pot with its alabaster roots on display. It was absolutely beautiful. For a day or two, everything seemed fine. I noticed the cut root had grown out of the drainage hole of this new pot. It seemed to be growing toward the air vent again. I moved the pot away from the vent, but the next morning more roots had curved down the sides of the pot, heading in the same direction. I decided to trim these to keep everything in the pot. Overnight, the tree dropped leaves and looked less healthy. I felt guilty. I tried to rationalize that maybe it wasn't getting the ventilation it needed, and this was its way of meeting its needs. From there, little things began to happen that I didn't notice enough to care about. The den started to smell like soil, which I thought was due to the newly exposed roots. Then I started to find dust around the air vents in the house. And last month, my water bill spiked, which I thought was related to a tapping I had been hearing in the walls that my landlord refused to come check out. A couple of days ago, I had people over for a housewarming party. It was the first time most of my friends had seen the place. I cleaned more than I needed to and rotated the bonsai on the side table so that the light hit it just right. The trunk had thickened into this elegant curve, and the exposed roots wrapped over the stone it sat on like pale fingers. The leaves were glossy and dense. It looked like something ancient that I had inherited, and people noticed immediately. "Wait," Emily said, leaning over it with her drink in her hand. "Is this the same tree from your pictures?" "Yeah." "No, it isn't." "It is," I said proudly. "You planted this, 3 months ago?" Something like that." She looked at me like she had caught me in some lie, but that quickly turned to concern. "That's not normal." From the kitchen, somebody said the den smelled like a greenhouse. Someone else said it smelled like pennies. I pretended not to hear that. I haven't smelled anything in weeks. Mark wasn't a bad guy. He just makes mistakes when he is drunk. Toward the end of the night, he crouched in front of the bonsai with a beer in his hand and gave it a serious look. "This is fake," he said. I ignored him. "It looks fake," he said, louder. "That means it's doing well," I said, trying to dismiss him. "You bought a tiny plastic tree and invented a whole personality around it." He reached out and flicked one of the leaves, not hard, just enough to make it move. I stepped toward him before he even realized I was doing it. "Don't." The room went quiet. Mark held up both hands. Sorry. Didn't know you and Bonnie were serious." A few people laughed. I did too, because I needed him to move on. Then he tipped his beer toward the pot. "Banzai!" The whole room laughed as a little beer spilled over the rim and darkened the soil. "Mark!" I scolded automatically. He looked at the pot, then at me. "Relax, it's a tree." I feel stupid now, but I was angry. A protective kind of anger, like he had done something to hurt a family member. I got paper towels and dabbed at the soil while everyone moved on. Someone changed the music and the room loosened again. The rest of the night was normal. People drifted between the kitchen, the den, and the back patio. The weather was nice enough now to keep the back door open for a while. I had a cooler outside by the steps because my fridge was full. At some point, I remember Mark announcing he was going out to grab another drink, looking at Bonnie, and asking, "Want one, babe? Be right back." He went through the kitchen and out the back door and just didn't come back. Nobody noticed for a while. By midnight, the stragglers began to head out. Emily was the first one to ask, "Where's Mark?" I said, "He's probably left. His car is still here." His car was parked exactly where it had been, under the oak near the curb. His jacket was still hanging over one of my dining chairs. His keys were still in the key box I put out for guests. His phone was on the kitchen island, buzzing every few minutes with messages from the same group chat we were all in. That was when everyone sobered up. We searched the yard with our phone flashlights. We checked everywhere, even the stupid places you check when you know a grown man can't fit, but you check anyway. Someone suggested he got picked up. Someone else said maybe he walked off drunk. Eventually, someone called the police. They came, asked questions, looked around, and took notes. I told them he had gone outside for a beer and never came back. So the search focused outward. By the time everyone left, it was almost 5 in the morning. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after the last car pulled away. The bonsai sat in the den where I had left it. The soil seemed even darker now than when the beer had been spilled. I let it be and went to bed. I woke up this morning and I found something green growing out of my kitchen sink. At first I thought it was a piece of spinach. When I looked longer, I saw 3 little shoots coming up through the drain. Thin, pale stems with tiny green leaves at the ends. They leaned toward the window over the sink. I touched one with a fork. It bent away from the metal. I dropped the fork into the sink as I jumped backwards. That was when I remembered the card from the box. Do not allow root access beyond pot. I thought that meant the roots might make it harder to repot without damaging the plant. I grabbed the drain cleaner from under the sink, and I poured until the chemical smell burned my nose and the little green shoots disappeared under the liquid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, pipes knocked all around me, and I thought the house would split in half. A violent and deep metallic banging from inside the wall behind the sink traveled under the floor, then somewhere toward the den. I stepped back as the drain hissed, and the whole counter trembled. Something below me made a low, shifting sound, like furniture being dragged across a room. From the den came a dry rustling of leaves, 1,000 tiny movements layered on top of one another, like the tree was shivering. As quickly as it had started, the house went quiet, and I stood there with the empty bottle in my hand. I thought I had fixed it. I poured boiling water down after it, hoping it would wash out the chemicals from my pipes. I went into the den and saw that the bonsai had outgrown its wire, The training wire I had wrapped so carefully around the trunk to shape it was embedded halfway into the bark. The trunk had thickened around it in minutes. The bark bulged around each turn like a ring around a swollen finger. The leaves looked wet, glossy, and full. New roots had spilled over the side of the pot and touched the floor. One of them had reached the vent again. A new one had stretched in the opposite direction toward the kitchen. I stood in the doorway and tasted metal. I hadn't poisoned it. I fed it. That was when I finally understood what should have been obvious from the beginning. I needed to kill it. I'd only been to the basement a handful of times for the breaker box, but I never took stock of the equipment in the far corner. The familiar smell I had become accustomed to was strong in the basement. As I scanned my flashlight across the room, I did not see any roots or branches. I searched the pile. Just a weed whacker, garden shears, shovel, and a machete. I bent over and took the machete. As I stood up, my eyes caught a thin strand hanging off the ceiling beam. It was one of the innumerable roots that had slithered across the support beams. As I ran my flashlight across the ceiling, I saw that they also followed the pipes, vents, and electrical lines. The entire house had become a trellis for this thing. In the far corner, I noticed two thicker root tips hanging limply, different than the rest. When I took a step toward them, I realized they were shoe laces. A shoe hanging from the ceiling by vines. Another step forward, and that shoe was attached to a leg. As I came closer, I was able to see Mark held in the air by roots. Some roots simply supported him. Others were growing shallow into his skin, still visible like tortuous veins. Large roots weaved through the wall of his chest. His eyes were held open by small tendrils hooked in the corners of his eyelids. Two thicker roots disappeared into his mouth. Smaller roots followed their path and threaded between his teeth and down his throat. I hoped he was already dead. Then his eyes were pulled towards me and his lips began to move silently under the control of the roots. The roots around his chest tightened, forcing air out of him one word at a time in a raspy, muffled tone. He's almost ready. I swung my machete, trying to cut what was left of Mark's body down, but they recoiled in response, pulling Mark tightly to the ceiling. As they squeezed him tight, a sound of anger came from his body. A thick limb swept the floor and knocked me to the ground. Roots reached down from the ceiling and grabbed my arm to pull me closer to Mark. I used my weapon to free myself. Every cut root leaked the metallic-smelling sap. Some of it fell on my face. It burned. The basement lights flickered and the HVAC began to roar. I needed to get upstairs, and I needed to wash off the sap before it burned too deeply into my skin. The roots chased me into the den. The trunk was twisting and thickening before my eyes. Its branches writhed as the exposed roots spilled over the pot and shot across the floor. Offshoots went into the air vents and covered the doors and windows. The tree itself was still quite small, with its exposed roots now beet red. I ran to the front door, grabbed the knob, and twisted. Nothing. The knob would not turn. I looked down and saw the thin red roots threading through the edge of the door frame. They had grown into the seams. I saw them flex and relax under the paint, like a vein under the skin. I tried to pull harder. The door may have shifted half an inch, just enough for the roots to tighten back the gap. I ran desperately to the back door. Same thing. The kitchen window was my next best bet. I had it open about 2 inches when roots shot out, grabbed it, and slammed it shut with enough force to crack the glass. Then red roots spread across the pane, weaving through the broken glass until there was no opening left. I stopped for a moment, helpless, waiting for the roots to take hold, but nothing. Then there was tapping. One inside the kitchen wall, one beneath the floor in the den, 2 or 3 above me in the ceiling. Back and forth. The taps never seemed to happen at the same time, like they were waiting for the other to finish. Were they communicating or testing something? Maybe they were mapping the house, learning the exits, and closing them. I thought about the pot in the den, the stone with the roots displayed exactly how I wanted them. I thought about how I'd carefully shaped my tree. It was beauty through restraint. I failed to keep the tree contained. It found a bigger pot, and I was in it. Then the walls creaked, the floor under me gave a pop, and in the den, the leaves began to rustle. So, now I'm in my home office. I don't know if I want to slash my way through the window or try my luck at destroying the part of this thing still in the pot. I don't know if that would do any more than anger it, but I think it might be worth a shot. I can still hear the branches and the leaves rustling when I hear the occasional tapping and creaking. Small roots are sweeping their way under the door now, feeling around, exploring the new space. I'm not waiting for them to find me. I'm going to make a run for it and destroy whatever is still in that pot. If you see this post, do not order seeds from any site claiming to have accelerated stock. And if a box arrives without a postmark, do not open it. Do not give it soil. Do not give it water. Do not give it a pot. Do not give it a home.